So national origin discrimination, as we've said, is protected per Title VII. It is similar to other protected groups with regard to decisions, segregation, classification of workers, et cetera, et cetera. National origin is very similar to the idea of ethnicity. What is my ethnic background? What is my national origin? Where did I come from? And can someone be a white African? Absolutely, because there are people who are lighter skinned in the northern part of Africa. There are people who were born and raised in Africa, and people who are from South Africa, right? And so we know that we can have, um, that national origin that is not necessarily in alignment with color. Sometimes it is, but not always. Disparate treatment, disparate impact claims, same sort of situation, having to make your prima facie case that national origin was the reason why that you were rejected from the job. You can make your prima facie case that way. And the same thing with disparate impact, looking at national origin and seeing whether or not there are um, uh, claims that that this group of individuals tended to be discriminated against unintentionally, um, uh, given the where they come from in terms of national origin. English only rules, again, we'll get into this in a bit, um, is considered largely discriminatory by the EEOC, but some of the courts have disagreed with that, and they've put some boundary conditions around what it means to have an English only rules and what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So it is important that we're aware of what those boundary conditions are so that we can allow for um, English only rules, but in narrow circumstances. Similar to what we've already talked about in terms of making a prima facie case, same thing holds here. As you can see, the individual has to be a member of a protected class, that they were qualified for the position for which they applied, or in which they were already employed. The employer makes an employment decision against the applicant, and the position was filed by somebody who was not a member of that protected class. So again, if they were equally qualified, why did they necessarily choose somebody else? And if the person from a different country or with a different national origin was better qualified, why were they not hired for the position? So who are members of the protected class? Number one, national origin encompasses where you were born. If you were born outside of the United States, that is considered a different national origin. So if I was born in, say, Mexico, but I'm a citizen here in the United States, now that is still considered to be my national origin, Mexico. If you have, excuse me, if you have certain ethnic characteristics or origins, so for myself, and like my friend Olga, who I talked about earlier, she was born actually here in the United States, but still has an accent. And so that is presumed that she has a different national origin. And the assumption is that she's not a U.S. citizen or is not eligible to work in the U.S. because of that accent. So again, some of the characteristics, the accents that come along, is not necessarily indicatory of somebody who was a citizen or is not a citizen or is not eligible to work here. Our EEOC guidelines say discrimination because of an individual is from a certain place or has the physical, cultural, or linguistic characteristics of a particular national origin group. Goes back to that idea of cultural attributes or linguistic characteristics that might be relevant to somebody who lived in another country. Um, National origin discrimination can include discrimination by members of the same national origin group. So you're not limited to only majority groups discriminating against people from a certain national origin. We can actually see within groups there may be hierarchies or pecking orders, if you will, where someone could discriminate against somebody else because they're from a different village from me or a different part of the country from me, and I don't like them, but I only like these people. It's can get very touchy. So national origin discrimination isn't just limited to white folks and white citizens, making decisions about who is considered to be appropriate to work here or not. It can be even within ethnic groups we see this issue. Protection against discrimination based on country of origin is not necessarily not protection on country of citizenship. So what we're talking about is not citizenship related issues. For example, if you're a citizen of another country, but you're working here in the United States, the only thing that's at issue is that your country of origin is from someplace else. And even though you're allowed to work here in the United States, you are protected under EEOC. The citizenship of your country doesn't matter. So you could be a citizen of another country and still be legally working here, and it would still be a form of national origin discrimination. Other couple cases to look at: EEOC versus MVM Inc. and Espinoza versus Farrow Manufacturing Company. You should take a look at those in your textbook. National origin isn't just limited to people who were born in a different country or came from a different country. It can be an issue of discrimination if you are connected to a person with a specific national origin. For example, if you married an immigrant, if you married somebody from Mexico or from somebody from the Middle East or somebody from India, and they suffered discrimination because they are married to somebody of a different ethnic heritage, that's a form of national origin discrimination. If you are a member of an organization that is identified with a national group, so I might be a member of a group that protects immigrants or protects people from different national cultures, and I would be discriminated against because I'm a member of that group. If I'm a participant in a school or a religious organization that's affiliated with a national origin group, for example, I know that there are language immersion schools. A friend of mine sent her children to a German language immersion school, and those kids could be discriminated against because of the fact that they went to a school where German was taught, right? Or Muslim, from Muslim groups oftentimes will have Arabic immersion schools, right? And again, so they keep part of that heritage because Muslim and Arabic are obviously overlapping, and there's some tight connections between national origin and religion and things like that. So it is important that we recognize that if you're engaged in any kind of religious education or religious organization based on national origin, that you can differentiate between the religious discrimination and because of your national origin, because you speak Arabic, because you speak German, because you go to those schools where they're teaching that. If you have a surname that is generally associated with a national origin group, for example, if I had my maiden name is Sosnowski, and if I went to an organization, they said, we don't hire people who are Polish. Sorry, we just don't do that. And while I'm not necessarily from Poland, I was not born there. I was born here in the United States. That's the connection that I have to my Polish heritage, and people could still discriminate against me because of the heritage of my name. If someone is perceived by an employer to be a member of a particular national origin group, whether or not the individual is in fact of that origin. So if it's presumed that you are part of a particular national origin and then you are treated differently because of that presumption, you are still protected and covered under Title VII. Okay, with respect to qualifications or bona fide occupational qualifications, this is the defense, right, that an employer can use for saying, I will only hire this group and I will not hire that group, whatever that is. These exceptions are very strictly construed and limited by the EEOC, and you can see this on page 352 and 353 in the textbook addressing what those limitations are. I can, as an employer, say that I will only hire somebody of a particular ethnic origin because it is a bona fide occupational qualification, that I need somebody with that background, with that knowledge, with that origin to be able to have them in a position. And what we can't do, of course, is can't say, well, my customers don't like people who are from India. My customers don't like people from Pakistan. And I had a boss tell me that once, which I was very offended by. You can't say my clients just aren't going to be happy working with somebody who's from Mexico, or my coworkers really won't get along with somebody who is from South Africa. So people's discomfort is not considered to be an appropriate defense. What is considered appropriate is someone from this ethnic background will do better in this job because is a requirement of the job. I used to work for a bank that was Lebanese in origin, and they hired an enormous amount of Lebanese citizens. Why? Because the mission and the vision of this bank was a small boutique bank who targeted people who were from Lebanon, who were displaced and came here to the United States. So A, being able to speak Arabic, B, being able to understand Lebanese culture, being able to work with and negotiate with and navigate business transactions for people from Lebanon was an important part of that. So they were able to make the case oftentimes that that hiring somebody who was Lebanese or who could speak Arabic, these were far more important to them than just hiring necessarily the best person for the job. Some positions, of course, that was different, but nonetheless. Ethnic restaurants, right, are not protected necessarily from hiring somebody who may not have a particular national origin. And I used to work at Benihana when I was in college, and it's a Japanese steakhouse, a hibachi steakhouse. For those of you that may not know what Benihana is, it's very much like Kyoto here in Edwardsville, Illinois. You sit at the tables and they have hibachi grills, and you cook your food, and they do a little performance in front of you, and then they feed you your food while you sit at the hibachi grill. So anyway, as a white woman, I wasn't hired to work in the dining hall because the dining hall, they wanted a particular atmosphere of people of the same national origin, but they hired me to work in their bar, and that was fine. So I worked as a cocktail waitress in the bar. If you're, and again, if people had challenged it, very likely they could have argued that it's part of the image that they were projecting. But it is a bona fide occupational qualification for them, or at least they thought so, with respect to what the image would look like in the dining room. But that's generally not upheld. Ethnic restaurant wait staff saying you can't hire somebody because my clientele is going to be uncomfortable with it. It is important to note, right, that a person has to be qualified for the job to get the job under a BFOQ. So you can't have say, well, I'm Lebanese, but I'm not qualified to do this particular position. The assumption is that someone is qualified before you can go the next step and say, and I want someone with this particular ethnic origin because it serves the business needs of my organization. National origin and national citizenship are not the same, as we've already discussed. Citizenship is not necessarily a protected category. National origin is, right? So if someone's a citizen in another country and they want to work here, if they don't have a visa to be eligible to work here, that's not a form of national origin discrimination. What is a form of national origin discrimination is if they're eligible to work here, they apply, they're qualified, they're the best person, and you decide that you don't want somebody from North Africa working for you. That could be a form of national origin discrimination. And there's a couple cases there. The Espinoza case is about the citizenship issues, and then the Cortesano is about how a spouse was discriminated against because of her spouse's their spouses um, was here as an undocumented worker.